My grandmother was the kind of woman who pressed wildflowers between the pages of old novels and remembered the exact date of every first snowfall for the past 40 years. She kept a journal. She made pie from scratch. She called me every Sunday at 10 in the morning, and if I didn't pick up within 3 rings, she'd leave a voicemail that started with, "Sweetheart, it's Grammy. Just checking you're still alive." I thought I knew what family meant because of her. Turns out I had no idea what the rest of them were. Her name was Dorothy. Grammy Dot, we called her, though she'd wrinkle her nose at it sometimes and say she'd always wanted to be called something more elegant. She was 79 years old, still sharp as a tack, still driving herself to church on Sundays, still alphabetizing her bookshelves by author last name. Then last spring she had a stroke. Minor, the doctors said. Manageable. But it was enough to shift something in the air around our family, enough to bring the vultures circling. I should back up. There are 4 of us grandchildren, my cousin on my mother's side, whom I'll call by his nickname, Bear. His real name is something embarrassing he's asked us not to use since he was 12. Then there's his younger sister, Trish, who is 2 years older than me and has always looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture you're trying to figure out how to move. My uncle's son, Devin, who lives out in Phoenix and mostly appears at Christmas when there's food involved. And then there's me. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I was the one who lived 20 minutes away from Grammy Dot. I was the one who took her to her cardiologist appointments and sat in the waiting room reading 6-month-old magazines. I was the one who noticed when her porch light burned out and replaced it without being asked. I drove her to Sunday service when the ice was bad. I called her back every Sunday within those 3 rings. That's not me bragging. That's context. My mother, Grammy's daughter, passed away when I was 19. A car accident on I-90 in February. Grammy was the one who identified her. Grammy was the one who held my hand at the funeral while I was too numb to cry. After that, the 20-minute drive between our houses became something I did without thinking, the way you breathe or blink. It wasn't obligation. It was the only family I had left that felt real. So when Grammy had her stroke and I drove to the hospital at 2 in the morning since it stayed until they moved her to a regular room. At 11 the next day, I wasn't keeping score. I wasn't thinking about anything except whether she'd wake up and recognize me. She did. She grabbed my hand and said, "You need to eat something. You look terrible." I cried the whole drive home. What I didn't know was that while I was sitting in that hospital room, a group text had been started. My uncle, my aunt by marriage, Bear, Trish, and Devin. A thread I was not included in. I only found out about it weeks later when Trish accidentally screenshot the wrong chat and sent it to me. She tried to recall the message, but I'd already seen it. The thread started the night Grammy was admitted. My uncle had written, "We need to talk about the house." Grammy owned technically, since she'd moved into assisted living by then, a 4-bedroom Victorian on Elmwood Avenue that she and my grandfather bought in 1971 for $42,000. In today's market, the Zillow estimate sits at just over $900,000. There's also a savings account, a small portfolio my grandfather set up before he died, and what Grammy always called the cedar chest situation, which none of us knew much about. In the group text I wasn't supposed to see, my uncle had written that Grammy wasn't going to be driving that house herself much longer, and that they needed to start having conversations. Bear had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Devin had asked whether they'd need a lawyer. Trish had written, "What about Mara?" My uncle had responded, "She's fine. She has her own life. This is family business. I am family, but apparently not that kind." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Grammy was still in the early weeks of her recovery, doing physical therapy 3 times a week, relearning some of the finer motor skills the stroke had temporarily stolen. She didn't need my drama on top of her own. So, I kept showing up. I kept driving her to therapy. I kept bringing her the almond croissants from the bakery on Clement Street that she liked, even though she'd pretend to be watching her sugar and then eat the whole thing anyway. One afternoon in June, about 6 weeks after the stroke, I arrived to find Grammy sitting at the little table by her window, with a wooden box on the surface in front of her. It was maybe the size of a shoebox, dark walnut with a small brass latch. I'd never seen it before. "What's that?" I asked. She looked at it for a moment before she looked at me. Something I've been meaning to deal with for a long time, she said. Come sit. I sat. She didn't open the box. She just rested her hands on top of it, the way you'd hold something fragile. She told me she'd been thinking, and Grammy thinking was always a serious thing, not idle, not scattered. She said she'd made some decisions. She'd spoken with a man named Mr. Calloway, who was her estate attorney, and she'd updated her documents the previous winter, before the stroke. She said she wanted me to know that, and she wanted me to know that she loved me, and that she saw me. Those were her words. I see you, sweetheart. I always have. I didn't fully understand what she was telling me. I thought she was just being emotional. She'd had a health scare. People get sentimental. I held her hand and told her I loved her too, and I didn't ask about the box, because something about the way she was holding it told me the moment wasn't mine to push. She passed it across the table to me. Keep this for me, she said. Don't open it yet. You'll know when. I took it home and put it on my closet shelf, and I didn't think about it much. I had work, I had my own appointments. I had Grammy to drive to physical therapy. Life kept moving the way it does. Grammy stabilized through the summer. By August, she was walking with just a cane, and she'd gotten most of her fine motor function back. She was funny again. She'd always been funny, dry and quick, in a way that could catch you off guard. And she was reading again, which she said was the thing she'd missed most. She called me every Sunday. The call got longer. She started asking about my job, my apartment, whether I was seeing anyone, all the questions she hadn't had energy for during the worst weeks. I told her I wasn't seeing anyone, and she said, good. Men are very time-consuming. Then she laughed at her own joke for about 20 seconds. My uncle came to visit twice that summer. Devin came once, for a weekend, and took Grammy to dinner at a restaurant she'd mentioned wanting to try. Bear and Trish came for a Sunday in July. I know all this because Grammy told me, and because I'd see the guest sign-in log at the front desk when I came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. What I noticed, though I told myself I wasn't keeping track, was that none of them ever overlapped with me. In September, Grammy's doctor told her that her living situation was going to be permanent. She'd been holding on to the idea of going home, back to Elmwood Avenue, but the house had stairs and no first-floor bathroom, and her balance still wasn't reliable. The doctor was gentle about it. Grammy was not particularly interested in being handled gently, so she just nodded and said, fine. Then I suppose someone will have to deal with the house. She told me this over the phone. I asked if she wanted me to help coordinate anything, storage or donations or whatever she needed. She said, your uncle is handling it. Something in her tone was careful. I noticed it, but I didn't push. What I found out later, much later, a detail that surfaced in a conversation I was never supposed to be part of, was that my uncle had already been in contact with a real estate agent. He'd had the house walked through in August. He'd been talking to Bear and Trish and Devin about how to handle the proceeds. He'd apparently told them that Grammy had informally agreed that the estate would be divided 4 ways among the grandchildren. Grammy had agreed to nothing of the sort, but none of us, least of all me, knew that yet. The letter arrived on a Thursday in October. I almost didn't open it that day. It was addressed to me, formal, on ivory stock, from an office I didn't recognize, Calloway & Associates Estate Law. I stood in my apartment hallway in my coat with my keys still in my hand and read it twice. Mr. Calloway's office was writing to inform me that I was a named beneficiary in the estate documents of Dorothy Ann Whitmore, Grammy's full legal name, and that as such I was being formally invited to attend a reading of those documents at their downtown office on November 4th, at 2 in the afternoon. I sat down on my entryway bench and read it a third time. I didn't understand, not because it didn't make sense, but because no one had mentioned anything about any of this to me. No call from my uncle, no group text, nothing. I texted my uncle, "Did you get a letter from Grammy's estate attorney?" He responded 3 hours later, "Yes, we're handling it. You don't need to worry about it." I stared at that message for a long time. We're handling it. As if I had asked to be excused from a chore. As if my name appearing on official legal documents was an administrative detail someone else could handle on my behalf. I wrote back, I received an invitation to attend the reading on November 4th. He called me that evening. The conversation was short, and in retrospect, should have made me more alarmed than it did. He said the family had already had some preliminary discussions about the estate, that Grammy had communicated her wishes informally over the years, that things were, basically, already settled, and that they just needed to go through the legal formality. He said he thought it might be less complicated if I let them handle the reading and they would fill me in afterward. I asked what that meant. He said Grammy's estate was going to be divided among the grandchildren, and he was managing the logistics. I asked if Grammy's attorney knew he was saying this. He paused. Then he said, "I'll reach out to Calloway." He didn't, or if he did, it didn't go the way he as expected. November 4th arrived on a Tuesday, gray and cold, the first genuinely winter-feeling day of the year. I took the morning off work. I put on my good coat. I drove downtown and parked in a garage 2 blocks from the office and sat in my car for a few minutes, just breathing. I had not told my uncle I was coming. The office of Calloway and Associates was on the 4th floor of a building near the Civic Center. Old building, nice lobby. The kind of place where the elevator buttons were brass and the carpet was the color of pine needles. A receptionist walked me to a conference room and offered me water. I took it. I was the first one there. My uncle arrived about 10 minutes later with his wife, my aunt by marriage, who I've always found difficult to read. Polite in the way that's indistinguishable from cold. Then Bear, without Trish, who I'd find out later had a conflict. Devin was on video, propped up on someone's phone at the end of the table. Nobody had expected me. My uncle looked at me the way you look at something that shouldn't be where it is. He said carefully, "We didn't know you were coming." I said, "I was invited." He said, "We talked about this." I said, "We talked about you handling things." I decided I'd rather be here. His wife put a hand on his arm. He sat down. Mr. Calloway came in shortly after. A small man in his late 60s, trim white beard, glasses. The kind of organized quiet that comes from decades of navigating other people's worst moments. He shook everyone's hands, introduced himself to Devin on the screen, and set a folder on the table. Then he looked at my uncle and said, pleasantly, but without any warmth, "I understand there may have been some communication about this process that didn't go through my office. I want to clarify at the outset that any informal discussions or understandings about Mrs. Whitmore's estate do not supersede the legal documents we will be reviewing today." My uncle started to say something. Mr. Calloway looked at him with exactly the kind of patience that is not actually patient at all, and continued. He explained that Grammy had updated her estate documents in January, before the stroke, clear-headed, with 2 witnesses and a notary. He explained that she had been explicit about her intents and had documented her reasoning in a letter attached to the formal paperwork, which he would read in full. Then he opened the folder. My uncle sat forward slightly. Bear had his arms crossed. Devin's face on the phone was hard to read through the small screen. Mr. Calloway read Grammy's letter first. "I won't share all of it. Some of it is private that belongs to her and to me and to the walls of that conference room. But the substance of it was this. Grammy had watched, over the course of many years and with great clarity, how different members of her family related to her. She said she wasn't interested in rewarding presence or punishing absence in a simple accounting ledger way, because people had their own lives, and she understood that. But she said there was a difference between people who loved her and people who loved what they might one day receive from her, and she had. Her words, seen that difference clearly, especially in the years since my mother died. She named me by name. She said I had shown up not because I was asked to, and not because I expected anything, but because I wanted to. She said the Sunday calls were her favorite part of her week. She said she hoped I would use whatever she left me to make my life more spacious, which was the word she used. Spacious. And which is so perfectly her that I had to press my lips together to keep from crying out loud in front of everyone. Mr. Calloway then outlined the estate, the house on Elmwood Avenue, Grammy's primary asset, and its full proceeds upon sale were left to me, the savings account to me, the investment portfolio to be split between a local literacy nonprofit Grammy had supported for 30 years, and the endowment of a scholarship at the university where my grandfather had taught. To the other grandchildren, she left specific personal items. Bear received my grandfather's watch collection. Devin received the set of first edition books Grammy had kept in the den. Trish received the dining room furniture, which Grammy knew she'd admired. There was no division of the house, there was no split of the savings. None of the informal arrangements my uncle had been operating under were reflected anywhere in the legal documents. The room was very quiet. My uncle said finally, "That can't be right." Mr. Calloway said, It is. My uncle said Grammy hadn't understood what she was signing, that she'd been under stress, that she hadn't been herself. Mr. Calloway said Grammy had been examined and confirmed competent by her physician prior to the signing, that the documents had been witnessed and notarized, and that if he wished to pursue a legal challenge, he was of course free to consult his own attorney, but that in Mr. Calloway's professional experience, a challenge under these circumstances was unlikely to succeed. My aunt by marriage stood up and left the room without a word. Bear uncrossed his arms and looked at the table. Devon's face on the phone screen did something complicated, and then the call dropped. I drove home in the dark, taking the long way without meaning to, ending up on streets I hadn't driven in years. I thought about Grammy's kitchen, the smell of it. Coffee, and something floral she kept in a dish by the window. I thought about sitting with her after my mother's funeral, the two of us at her kitchen table at midnight, not talking, just there. I thought about the wooden box. I went to my closet when I got home and took it down from the shelf. I sat on the floor with it for a minute before I opened the latch. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with kitchen twine. Letters my grandfather had written to Grammy before they were married, when he was stationed overseas. I recognized his handwriting from the birthday cards I'd gotten as a kid. Under the letters was a photograph. Grammy at maybe 22, laughing at something off camera, her hair dark, the sky behind her the particular blue of late summer, and at the bottom of the box, a folded note on Grammy's stationery, in her handwriting, from what looked like early this year. For you, when you're ready. These are the things that matter. Not the house, not the money. These. Take care of them. I sat on my bedroom floor for a long time. The months that followed were not simple. My uncle did consult an attorney, briefly. The attorney apparently told him what Mr. Calloway had said, that a challenge would be difficult. After that, things went cold and quiet in a way that was both a relief and its own particular ache. Bear sent me a message in December saying he wasn't angry, which I appreciated, even though I wasn't sure I believed it yet. Devon and I haven't spoken. Trish called me in January. We talked for almost an hour. She said she'd known, somewhere underneath everything, that what her father was doing wasn't right. She said she'd been uncomfortable with the group text. From the beginning, she said she was sorry. I told her. I appreciated that. I meant it. The house on Elmwood Avenue went on the market in February, after I spent a few weeks going through it with a donation coordinator and taking what I wanted to keep. I kept Grammy's bookshelves. I kept the dish from the window. I kept a pair of her reading glasses that she was always losing and that I kept finding in the kitchen junk drawer. I didn't keep the house itself. The neighborhood where it sat was beautiful, but it wasn't mine. Grammy understood that, I think. She didn't leave it to me because she expected me to live in it. She left it to me because she trusted me to decide. I used part of the proceeds to pay off my student loans, which had been hanging over me since I was 22. Part of it went into a savings account I named, privately, the Spacious Fund. That word. Spacious. I'm still figuring out what it means for my actual life, but I know she wanted me to stop cramming myself into spaces that were too small, financially, physically, emotionally. Part of it I donated to the literacy nonprofit, adding to what Grammy had already given them. The woman who ran the endowment called me to say thank you and mentioned that Grammy had been a volunteer reader there for 11 years. I didn't know that. I drove home crying. Grammy is still alive. She's still in the assisted living facility, still sharp, still calling me Sundays at 10. She asked me last month if I'd opened the box yet. I told her yes. She said, "And?" I said, "And I think I understand." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Good, now tell me about your week. Something interesting must have happened." So I told her. And she listened the way she always has, fully, without interruption, like I'm the only person whose story she wants to hear. That's what she gave me. Not the house, not the money, though those things matter, and I won't pretend they don't. She gave me the knowledge that I had been seen, clearly and truly, by someone whose seeing was worth something. The rest of my family showed her who they were, when they thought it was safe to do so. She'd been watching the whole time. She always was.